Online education is going to play a much larger role in the future of education than we anticipate. There's always going to be a place for contact education, I don't dismiss that, but the cost benefit is starting to be questioned. If your only goal is to have a degree, you can get a degree in a lot of different ways. Does it mean anything in terms of your future if you haven't been transformed? I think there's a misnomer around employment in this country, right? It's very hard to find employment. But for people with skills, I think you find employment. Not with degrees, with skills. So there's a lot of people that have degrees that may not have skills. They have learned something, theoretically, but they don't know how to apply it.
CTRL.ALT.SUCCEED is proudly brought to you by Milpark Education, redefining what online learning sounds like. Visit milpark.ac.za for more information.
Immersive Online, here to enhance the human experience or not. And here to tell us more is CEO of Milpark Education, Andrew Horsfall. Andrew, good day, and thank you again for giving us your time.
Hi, and it's really great to be here again.
Milpark Education has just launched this approach incorporated as part of their learning. Tell us a little bit more about Immersive Online.
So Immersive Online is a teaching and learning approach that tries to thread the best of contact education and distance education. Stereotypically, online education, I often frame it as the Wild West. There aren't clear ways of doing online education. If I say to a student distance education, there's a lot of clarity in their minds as to what that means. Well, historically, you'd stereotypically get given books in the post. You'd read your books, you'd do some work, and then you'd go and write some assessments. And support was available, but it was quite tricky. Obviously, as technology's evolved, those books in the post have become PDFs online. If someone says contact education, you also understand what that is. That's there's going to be a teacher in the classroom, a lot more freedom in the classroom to have a conversation, lectures from lecturers in the traditional sense. You obviously often see yourself as sitting in a lecture hall. And so in a lot of ways, that feels more of like you're part of a community, and it feels like you've got access to the teaching staff in a more direct sense compared to contact education. But online, I term it the Wild West because it's not clear necessarily how institutions are choosing to use online education to deliver teaching and learning. On the one extreme, you can actually create a fully contact learning experience online. You can use technology today where you can create online classrooms in the same way that you would create classrooms in an actual physical campus. And you can also, on the other extreme, do the equivalent of distance learning, but just online, where your PDFs are there, you log in, you click, you can download and do the same thing. And so when people say online education, it's not because it's not clear, students aren't necessarily aware of what they're signing up for and aren't really aware of what the trade-offs are.
Sure.
So Immersive Online is Milpark's way of choosing to stamp a very specific and intentional path through that to define online education for Milpark.
In South Africa, what is the rate of adoption with regards to online learning approaches?
Probably logically we're behind, I suppose, other sort of more developed countries in terms of their desire to use, their take up in terms of online education. But I think the trade-offs are so clear that online education is going to play a much larger role in the future of education than we anticipate. Particularly in our niche. If I draw an extreme point and I say, if you want to be a doctor, do you think you can become a doctor using online education? And the answer is probably not, because so much of your ability as a doctor is going to be through the lived experience with patients, bedside manner, actually physically seeing real things. I mean, I could draw it even more extreme. A physiotherapist can't become a physiotherapist online. I think you wouldn't trust a physiotherapist if they'd got the education online. So in a lot of ways, some types of education, because of the nature of the real work life, requires you to be in a non-online environment. And that's why Milpark doesn't do things like physiotherapy online. But when you look at the types of the space we play in, the niche that we play in, which is business education, and you ask yourself, well, where do business people work? And the answer to that is
Online,
right?
absolutely.
And they're on a computer. They're using tools that are in an online space. They're using applications that are on, connected to the cloud, and so the real lived life of people in business is online. And then how are you going to develop real skills if you're in a contact space? Are we all going to start writing Excel lines out? Or are we going to all be told to open up our computers and log into the computer and use online?
Yeah.
So I think in a lot of ways, it's becoming more obvious. I mean, if you think of AI, okay, so how are you going to use AI in a lecture environment, to create solutions for you? So the way we actually live out our real world life, particularly in the space that we're in, lends itself to online education. So it's going to take a bigger and bigger portion of the future of education, notwithstanding things like efficiency of time. I don't have to travel. I don't have to relocate. I don't have to pay costs of relocation. There's a lot of sort of expenses borne out by contact education that you avoid, which means the value then gets spent on. So if you're going to spend the same amount of money, more of the money goes towards actual education when you are doing it online, because you don't have to do all those other things.
There's current challenges in the education system that this approach will certainly address. Can you just take us through some of those challenges?
We've touched on this idea of feeling connected to community. Not all online is going to do this. Right? Online can be very isolating and very alone, and ultimately could be the antithesis of what we're trying to do online. Milpark Education believes that we can use online as a way to enhance the human experience, which is a bit of a weird juxtaposition. Like, you're using online to enhance, but in my
Human
mind,
experience,
but in my mind, it's about the experiences that you're cultivating and the community that you're building.
yeah.
And so for me, the challenge that it fundamentally addresses is this idea that we actually still learn in a community, and it's expensive to create those communities. You have to come to a physical campus. And so there's always going to be a place for contact education. I don't dismiss that. But the cost benefit is starting to be questioned. And online becomes the alternative where you can create 99% of the value with a fraction of the cost, and in a lot of ways better education than what contact education is. Contact education, a lot of the value of contact education is the fact that there's a cohort in a classroom. You have access to lecturers who lecture you. So in our Immersive Online, there are actually lecturers who run synchronous. So when we say synchronous, we mean sessions where you and the lecturer are actually physically present in the same space. Synchronous sessions where you can ask questions, you can challenge, you can be part of the classroom. You can hear other people asking questions. That's really important because, like, education is dynamic.
Sure.
And so proper education is done best when people, even if you're just an observer, not necessarily the one asking the questions, but you're observing other people ask questions. What if, but I don't understand that. Can you explain this? What about this hypothetical situation? And then you've got sort of facilitator that's responding to that and creating, and maybe asking the class to contribute, but essentially a dynamic learning environment that almost speaks to the complexity of the issues more than necessarily there's one way of understanding this. And so for me, synchronous moments are really, really important to develop proper learning. But in a traditional contact learning environment, often I think that value is lost because a lot of the lecturer's time is spent doing the same lecture every single year. And people don't go to classrooms anymore, or don't go to the lectures anymore, because it's like, why am I doing this? It comes out of the book. In theory, the lecturer is supposed to be using that platform to deliver a dynamic experience that's different to what you get in the textbooks. But because of the scale and the size of that type of teaching, it's become less and less like that. And because the class sizes are so big, no one asks questions in a lecture anymore. So I think there's something lost that we can recapture in our world.
Sure.
But what we don't do is lectures like that, because we believe in intentionally designing learning journeys where we have learning technologists, instructional designers that have actually designed a very intentional, specific learning journey that puts you through sort of moments of learning, provoking of questions, reflection, in sort of smaller bite-sized chunks that allows you to have a high level of engagement, interaction as you learn the primary material. And that, for me, by doing it intentionally with proper design, does a better job than what a lecture would do. And then you have these moments where you can come to a classroom and be part of a cohort. And so even connected to that is things like we have counselors on our course that provide psychosocial support, running groups that are connected to shared experiences, whether it's I'm struggling with work-life balance and how to manage the pressures at home and my family expectations of me. All the things that actually get in the way of your education. We've got people that play a role in facilitating that. And so for us, immersive online education is this dynamic new way of doing education in an online space in a way that's unconventional, that grabs sort of the authenticity of a contact experience.
Sure. Let's address the human element, Andrew, because I do think that, from traditionalists in the space, that's probably going to be the biggest pushback. How do we address that? And how do we ensure that we are not making the human experience obsolete in favor of, all the benefits that are glaring at us regarding immersive online?
I think online does run the risk that if you are not intentional, you may very well remove the human experience. So I think your question is very valid. From our perspective, because we believe so deeply in the human experience forming how you educate yourself, and actually your future success is going to come down to your human skills, not necessarily your technical skills. Because it's so fundamental to how we see education, we are very intentional to ensure that our learning experiences, particularly in our immersive online, are designed to cultivate that in the best way possible. And so you can do it online. It just requires intentionality.
Let's run through the technical process. How different is immersive online?
I think it's very, very different. Firstly, you go through learning experiences that have been curated for you. So to use an example, typically in a business, you would have potentially a dashboard, or you'd have some sort of business information that's presented to you, or do you report on, or you speak into to sort of show people where things are at. In a traditional educational environment, you'll learn about that, right? You'll learn, well, that's what people do, and that's what you can do. In our immersive online, we'll expect you to be able to do that. We'll show you how to do it. So we will now, this is very technical, but we will, for example, expect you to extract data out of a system that exists. We would expect you to change the data in Excel. We would expect you to import that data into a business information tool. We then expect you to be able to build a report out of that. And then we'd expect you to be able to showcase that report and then present on that report. So if you think about that sequence of events, that's not possible in either distance or contact. It is only possible online. And it can only be done when you're intentional in designing it that way, because you've built this immersive online experience.
Sure.
So immersive, we're immersing you in the real skills of the working world. Similarly, if you're doing an accounting system, we in business, so I'm referring to business a lot here, but you're going to learn accounting. Okay, on the one hand, you can learn about accounting. And in the old days, you might very well be given a general ledger or a journal book at home, and you'd write in the journal book and you'd do your accounting, because that's how accounting was done. But no one these days does accounting in a book anymore. They do accounting in an online system. So we will show you the online system. You'll set up your company in the online system. You'll process your transactions in the online system. So you'll actually be doing the work that accountant will do in learning. And so by the time you leave with your degree, you would already know what to do because you've been doing it. But if you left with a degree from a contact university, you'd still have to figure out how to apply that theoretical knowledge into a practical way. But because you've come through our learning, you wouldn't need to learn how to apply it, because application was embedded in the immersive nature of the online course.
Sure. So effectively, what we're producing is a high functional future workforce.
Because the education is very aligned to the real world of work, we're producing graduates that can actually be valuable in the world of work.
Yeah. How do we manage the supply versus demand, especially in South Africa? Considering the fact that if we're having an influx of high functional individuals that are ready to work, and they are being met with an industry that is absolutely static, how do we balance that, Andrew?
Well, I'll give you two answers.
Yeah.
First is that obviously it's not my responsibility in a direct sense to build the economy.
Absolutely not. You are a contributor,
we
though.
are contributing, yeah, for sure. But I think there's a misnomer around employment in this country, right? Obviously, if you just look at employment stats, it's very hard to find employment. But for people with skills, I think you find employment.
Sure.
Not with degrees, with skills. So there's a lot of people that have degrees that may not have skills. They have learned something theoretically, but they don't know how to apply it. And then they struggle to find a job because it becomes then the responsibility of the employer to teach the application, which means it's very expensive for the employer to take those people on at high risk that they will never learn to apply it. If you come to a context like ours, Immersive Online, where actually you're learning the skills as you go, you leave not just with a degree, because we believe education is a journey. You've been changed and you have skills. And those skills are directly applicable to the world of work. And then you can evidence that with a portfolio of evidence of actually stuff you've done, which makes you infinitely more employable than someone who can't.
Sure.
So I think if you're asking this question from a broad industry sense, I think we have a challenge. If you're asking the question from a Milpark Immersive Online perspective, I think it's a competitive advantage for a graduate to have.
Absolutely. Look, everything about it screams disruptor. And we've all seen what disruption has done, for industries. Let's talk to the nervous learner and prospective student that says, I quite like, downloading that PDF. I quite like this current online experience, and I'm not really looking forward to the immersive experience that this approach promises.
Yeah, well, I think my advice to that student would be, what are you wanting to achieve?
Sure.
And I think you have to have the maturity to own your own journey. And what I mean by that is that if your only goal is to have a degree, you can get a degree in a lot of different ways. You can get a degree very cheaply and you can have a degree. Does that mean anything in terms of your future if you haven't been transformed? And so the question really is, how do you become transformed so that you can add value in the places you go based on what you're wanting to achieve with your life? And I think that's what everyone should want, not just a degree. They think the degree is that, but that's not necessarily true, right? And so I think the problem culturally is that people want something without having to do the work to get it. Now, the work doesn't necessarily mean hard that you will fail hard. Hard as in challenging. And the goal for our Immersive Online is to challenge you so that you get shaped and developed, but not so hard that you get thrown off a cliff and fail, right? And I think a lot of the times with education, it's either binary, either fine or you fail. Whereas I want this space to be, it's challenging, it's tough, but you've got so much support. Everyone's with you. Your classroom is with you because there's a community. Your teachers are with you because they are peering with you and they can feel the emotional energy it takes to get through this and they can support you on that. We have the counselors that are there supporting you. And so you can do hard things.
Sure.
And if you can learn to do hard things, you can become something. And so is it going to be easy? No. Is it going to be hard in the sense of technically challenging that you're going to fail? No. I think we can scaffold you well and support you to get there.
Sure.
But is it going to be a free ride to get to an end? No. And that I'm not going to take away from that because that is actually what education at the core of it is.
Hundreds. If education doesn't challenge you, what is it doing then?
Yeah,
absolutely. Exactly. And let's do the same for prospective educators that are looking at Milpark, as an institution of choice. And they're looking at this approach and thinking, I don't know if I'm ready.
I think it's challenging. I think what we've discovered is that actually it shifts perspectives in educators as to what it means to be an educator.
Sure.
So we definitely are an unconventional place to work from that point of view. I'm not afraid about that. I think that's actually quite exciting. For a lot of people that are genuinely and truly educationalists, we're the best place to be.
Yeah.
If you are at a university because you are actually wanting to further your own learning and, teaching is a side project, then you won't enjoy our environment. And there are a lot of people that actually, if they really reflect on themselves, aren't necessarily in education for the students. They're there for themselves. And there's not necessarily judgment in that. It's just, that's not the type of environment we're building here.
CTRL.ALT.SUCCEED is proudly brought to you by Milpark Education, redefining what online learning sounds like. Visit milpark.ac.za for more information.